I never thought I'd spend my Saturday morning staring at a bulldozer parked in the middle of my wildflower field. But there I was, coffee in hand, watching my property rights get crushed under several tons of yellow metal. My name is Grant Calloway, and I'd moved to Meadowbrook, Texas 3 years ago specifically to get away from the cramped subdivision life I'd endured in Dallas. I bought 5 acres on the outskirts of town, built a modest house, and spent countless weekends cultivating a natural wildflower meadow that attracted butterflies and bees. It was my slice of peace, my retirement project at 42 after selling my software company. The property wasn't part of any HOA when I bought it, which was exactly why I'd chosen it. Then, Meadowbrook Estates expanded. The new development crept closer to my property line over the past year, fancy houses with identical gray siding sprouting up like mushrooms. I didn't mind the neighbors, really. What I minded was the letter I received 6 months ago informing me that due to a zoning reconfiguration, my property now fell under the purview of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. My lawyer told me it was technically legal since I was now surrounded on 3 sides by HOA properties and shared access to the main road through their development. I'd already had several run-ins with Patricia Anders, the HOA president. She was a 50-something woman with that particular haircut that screamed, "Let me speak to your manager," and a persistent habit of finding violations where none existed. My grass was too long. My mailbox wasn't the approved color. My wildflower field was unkempt and needed to be mowed into a proper lawn. But this morning took the cake. 3 pieces of heavy machinery sat in the middle of my field. A bulldozer, an excavator, and some kind of grading equipment I couldn't name. They'd driven right through my carefully maintained wildflowers, leaving deep tire tracks and crushed plants in their wake. A temporary chain-link fence had been erected along what used to be the far edge of my property, and I could see contractors setting up what looked like staging equipment for a large construction project. I walked out there in my pajama pants and boots, still clutching my coffee mug. A young guy in an orange vest was spray painting marks on the ground. "Excuse me," I called out. "What the hell is going on?" He looked up, squinting in the morning sun. "Construction staging for the Meadowbrook Estates Phase 4 project. Should be here for about 6 weeks. On my property." He shrugged. "I just go where they tell me, man. You'll have to talk to the project manager or the HOA. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The machinery, the tire tracks, the fence, the workers. Then I marched back to my house and started making calls. My first call was to Patricia Anders. It went to voicemail. Of course it did. "Patricia, this is Grant Calloway. Your contractors have parked heavy equipment on my private property without permission. Call me back immediately." My second call was to my lawyer, Tom Mitchell, who had kept on retainer specifically for HOA disputes. "They did what?" Tom asked, and I could hear him shifting papers around. "Grant, that's trespassing and potentially property damage." "I know. What do I do?" "Document everything. Photos, videos, measurements if you can. I'll draft a cease and desist letter. Don't let them do any more work until we sort this out." I spent the next hour taking detailed photographs and videos from every angle. The tire tracks had destroyed about half an acre of wildflowers. Some of the plants were native species that had taken 3 years to establish. I measured the machinery dimensions and noted the company name on the side of the equipment. Hartwell Construction Services, Austin, TX. By noon, Patricia still hadn't called back, but a different number called me. "Mr. Calloway, this is Brenda Chen from Hartwell Construction. I understand there's been some confusion about our equipment placement." "No confusion," I said. "Your machinery is on my private property without permission. I need it removed today. I'm afraid that's not possible. We have a signed contract with the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, to use that staging area for 6 weeks. Moving the equipment now would delay the entire project and cost thousands of dollars. That's not my problem. The HOA doesn't own my property and has no authority to grant you access to it. There was a pause. Sir, I'm looking at the site map right now. The staging area is clearly marked as HOA common area. Then your map is wrong. I have my property deed right here. That field is mine, not the HOA's, and your equipment is trespassing. Another pause, longer this time. Let me make some calls and get back to you. She didn't call back. Instead, at 2 in the afternoon, Patricia Anders showed up at my door with another woman I didn't recognize. Grant, Patricia said in that sugary voice that meant she was about to be condescending. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is how construction equipment ended up on my property. Our property, she corrected. The land you're referring to was designated as HOA common area in the expansion agreement. Didn't you receive the certified letter? I received a letter saying I was now subject to HOA bylaws regarding property maintenance. Nothing about giving up my actual land. The other woman stepped forward. She had dark hair pulled back severely and wore a blazer despite the Texas heat. Mr. Calloway, I'm Karen Ashford, the HOA's legal counsel. Perhaps we should discuss this inside. I didn't want to let them in, but I also didn't want to have this conversation on my front porch where neighbors could watch. Fine. We sat in my living room, and Karen pulled out a tablet loaded with documents. The zoning reconfiguration included an easement agreement for properties bordering the new development. The eastern portion of your property, approximately 1 acre, was designated for potential community use. Show me where I signed that. The agreement was approved by county commissioners after the required notification period. Landowners had 60 days to file objections. I never received any notification. Patricia made a sympathetic noise that wasn't at all sympathetic. The notices were sent to all affected properties. Perhaps you overlooked it. I don't overlook things regarding my property. I stood up. Even if this easement exists, which I doubt, it doesn't give you the right to damage my field or park equipment without notification and compensation. Karen's expression remained neutral. The HOA maintains that the land in question falls under our jurisdiction. However, to avoid prolonged legal disputes, we're willing to offer you a one-time payment of $500 for any inconvenience. I laughed. Actually laughed. $500. Your contractors destroyed native wildflowers that took 3 years to establish. The equipment is tearing up the ground and will require extensive remediation, and you want to pay me $500. It's a generous offer for land you're not actively using, Patricia said. Get out. Excuse me. Get out of my house. You want to claim that field? Show me the paperwork. Real paperwork, not some tablet presentation. Until then, that equipment is trespassing and I'm charging storage fees. Karen's eyebrow raised slightly. Storage fees. Commercial equipment storage in this area runs about $200 per day per piece. You've got 3 pieces of machinery. That's $600 per day starting this morning. Pay up or move them. Patricia's face went red. You can't do that. Watch me. Now leave before I call the sheriff for trespassing. Not the equipment, you two. They left, but not before Patricia promised I'd be hearing from their lawyers. Tom called me that evening. Grant, I did some digging at the county records office. There was an easement agreement filed, but the notification process looks questionable. They sent letters to the addresses on the tax rolls, but several people have come forward saying they never received them. So, what does that mean? It means you might have grounds to challenge the easement itself. but that's a long legal process. In the meantime, you're well within your rights to demand they remove the equipment. And yes, you can absolutely charge storage fees if they refuse. How do I make that official? I'll draft a formal notice. We'll have it delivered by courier tomorrow morning so there's a clear paper trail. List your daily rate. Explain that it's based on market rates for commercial equipment storage, and give them 48 hours to remove the machinery before fees start accruing. They've already been there since last night. Then you can backdate the fees to when they arrived, but it's cleaner to start from when they receive official notice. Trust me on this. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I looked out my bedroom window, I could see the dark shapes of the machinery silhouetted against the stars. My peaceful field had become an industrial staging ground, and I felt that particular kind of anger that comes from having your space violated. Sunday morning, I drove into town to print out official no trespassing signs at the hardware store. When I got back, there were workers crawling all over the construction site, not just near the equipment but actually using it. I parked my truck and walked out there. "Hey, who authorized this?" A man in a hard hat turned around. He was older, maybe 60, with sun-weathered skin and a no-nonsense expression. "I'm Dave Hartwell, site supervisor, and you are the property owner. Grant Calloway, this is my land and you need to get your people and equipment off it right now." "Got paperwork saying otherwise." He pulled a folded document from his pocket. HOA easement agreement filed with Meadowbrook County on February 15th. I snatched it from his hand and read through it quickly. It was the easement Karen had mentioned, but as I read the legal description of the property, something jumped out at me. This describes property beginning at the corner of Cedar Ridge Lane and Meadowbrook Drive. My property is on Hillside Road. Dave took the paper back and squinted at it. Lady from the HOA said this was the right spot. The lady from the HOA is wrong. You're on private property without permission, and you're now officially trespassing. I want everyone off my land in the next hour or I'm calling the sheriff. Now hold on. We've got a schedule to keep. Can't just pack up and move because you're having a property line dispute. It's not a dispute. This is my land. 1 hour. He got on his radio and I heard him calling someone named Patricia. Great. I went back to my house and called Tom. They're actually working out there now. Using the equipment. That's destruction of property and continued trespassing. Call the sheriff's non-emergency line and file a report. I'll be there in 40 minutes. The sheriff's deputy arrived before Tom did. His name was Officer Rodriguez, and he looked deeply tired of his job. "Mr. Calloway, you called about a property dispute." I explained the situation while we walked out to the field. The workers had stopped operating the machinery but hadn't left. Dave Hartwell met us at the fence line. "Officer," Dave said, nodding, "this is a misunderstanding. We've got proper authorization from the HOA." "Do you have authorization from Mr. Calloway?" Rodriguez asked. "Don't need it. The HOA controls this land." I handed Rodriguez my property deed, which I'd wisely brought with me. He looked it over, then at the easement agreement Dave showed him, then back at my deed. "This easement describes different property than what's shown on this deed," Rodriguez said. "Until that's resolved, this is a civil matter, but the equipment is currently on land deeded to Mr. Calloway." "Sir," he addressed Dave, "I'd recommend removing your equipment until the property boundaries are legally clarified." "We've got a contract," Dave protested. "Then you need to talk to whoever you signed that contract with, because right now you're on this gentleman's property without his permission." Rodriguez turned to me. "Mr. Calloway, I'm documenting this as a property dispute. If they refuse to leave, you can seek an injunction through civil court. If they cause any further damage, call us back and we can look at criminal trespass charges. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was something. Dave made another radio call, and this time I heard Patricia's voice squawking angrily through the speaker, though I couldn't make out words. Tom arrived just as Rodriguez was leaving. He took photos of everything, talked briefly with Dave, and then pulled me aside. "Here's what's going to happen," Tom said. "They're not going to move the equipment today. They're going to claim the property boundaries are unclear and that they're acting in good faith based on the HOA's representations. But we're going to file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning to force them to stop work and remove the machinery. In the meantime, I want you to put up those no trespassing signs and send your storage fee notice. How much is this going to cost me in legal fees?" "Don't worry about that right now. If we're right about the property boundaries and the questionable easement process, we can recover fees from the HOA." I spent the rest of Sunday posting no trespassing signs around the field and the equipment. Dave and his crew watched but didn't interfere. As the sun set, they packed up their tools and left, but the machinery stayed behind, 3 yellow giants squatting in my ruined wildflowers. Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, a courier delivered my storage fee notice to both the HOA office and Hartwell Construction. The notice was beautifully formal, drafted by Tom in perfect legalese. It outlined daily storage fees of $250 per piece of equipment, effective immediately, with late payment penalties accruing at 10% per week. Patricia called me at 8:30. "You have lost your mind," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too, Patricia. Storage fees. This is extortion. This is standard commercial practice. Your contractors are storing equipment on my property without permission. I'm entitled to compensation. That's HOA property. Show me the documentation that proves it. Real documentation, not some questionable easement that describes the wrong parcel. You're going to regret this, Grant. The HOA has resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you in legal fees. Looking forward to it." I hung up. Tom filed the emergency injunction at 9. The hearing was set for Thursday morning, which meant 3.5 more days of accruing storage fees. Tuesday, I woke up to find someone had spray-painted HOA property across the side of my fence. I took photos and filed another police report. Rodriguez came out again, looking even more tired. "Any idea who did this?" he asked. "Probably someone from the HOA or the construction company, but I can't prove it. Security cameras would be a good investment. Already ordered them." Tuesday afternoon, I received a cease and desist letter from Karen Ashford, demanding I remove my no trespassing signs and stop charging storage fees. Tom responded with our own letter, demanding immediate removal of the equipment and payment of all fees accrued to date. Wednesday morning brought a surprise. A different construction company showed up, this one with a flatbed truck large enough to haul away the machinery. I walked out to meet them. "You guys here to pick up the equipment?" The driver, a woman with gray hair and oil-stained coveralls, shook her head. "Here to move it to the proper staging area. Apparently there was a mix-up about property lines." Finally, I watched as they loaded the bulldozer onto the flatbed. It took most of the morning, but by noon, all 3 pieces of machinery were gone. I called Tom. "They moved the equipment. That's good news. Did they pay the storage fees?" Nobody said anything about payment. "Then we'll add it to the civil complaint." The injunction hearing is still on for tomorrow. We need it on record that they trespassed and caused damage. Thursday morning, I put on my only suit and drove to the Meadowbrook County Courthouse with Tom. The hearing was in a small courtroom that smelled like old wood and furniture polish. Patricia was there with Karen Ashford. Dave Hartwell sat in the back row, looking uncomfortable in business casual clothes. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Helen Pritchard. She had reading glasses on a chain and the expression of someone who'd heard every possible property dispute in her 30 years on the bench. "This is a request for an emergency injunction," Judge Pritchard said, looking at the papers in front of her. "Mr. Calloway claims that construction equipment was placed on his property without permission. The HOA claims the property in question is subject to an easement agreement. Who wants to go first?" Tom stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, the issue here is straightforward. The easement agreement filed by the HOA describes property at the intersection of Cedar Ridge Lane and Meadowbrook Drive. My client's property is located on Hillside Road, approximately half a mile away. The equipment was placed on my client's deeded property, not on the easement land." Karen Ashford stood. "Your Honor, there was an administrative error in the property description on the filed easement. However, the intent was clear, and all affected property owners were notified." "Do you have proof my client was notified?" Tom asked. "Notices were sent by certified mail to all addresses on the county tax rolls. My client never received such a notice. You have a signed receipt." Karen shuffled through her papers. "The Postal Service shows the letter was delivered." "To what address?" "To 1247 Hillside Road." I leaned over to Tom. "My address is 1274 Hillside Road." Tom smiled. "Your Honor, they sent the notice to the wrong address. My client lives at 1274 Hillside Road, not 1247. He never received notification of the easement and therefore never had the opportunity to file an objection." Judge Pritchard looked at Karen over her reading glasses. "Is this true?" Karen's face had gone slightly pale. "That appears to be a clerical error, Your Honor. However, the easement itself is still valid." "An easement filed with an incorrect property description and notification sent to the wrong address." Judge Pritchard made a note. "Counsel, I'm not going to rule on the validity of the easement itself today. That requires a full hearing. But I am going to order that no construction activity takes place on Mr. Calloway's property until the property boundaries are properly surveyed and the easement issue is resolved. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," both lawyers said. "Now, what's this about storage fees?" Tom stood again. "Your Honor, the construction equipment remained on my client's property for 4 days despite repeated requests for removal. Mr. Calloway is seeking payment of daily storage fees at commercially reasonable rates." "How much?" $250 per day, per piece of equipment. 3 pieces for 4 days comes to $3,000. Patricia made a strangled noise from her seat. Judge Pritchard looked at Karen. "Does the HOA dispute that the equipment was on Mr. Calloway's property?" "We dispute that storage fees are applicable in a good faith property dispute, Your Honor. Good faith requires at least getting the address right when you send notifications," Judge Pritchard said dryly. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm ordering a professional survey of the property boundaries, to be completed within 2 weeks and paid for by the HOA. If that survey confirms that the equipment was on Mr. Calloway's deeded property, the HOA will be liable for storage fees, damages to the property, and Mr. Calloway's legal fees. If the survey shows the land belongs to the HOA, then Mr. Calloway will remove his no trespassing signs and drop his fee claims. Does everyone understand?" We all nodded. "Good. Court is adjourned. I want that survey on my desk no later than May 23rd. Outside the courthouse, Patricia confronted me while Tom and Karen were still talking. "You're making a big mistake," she said. "Even if you win this, you're still subject to HOA rules. We can make your life miserable. You already have been. That's why I'm not backing down." We could have worked something out, a compromise. You parked bulldozers on my property and spray painted my fence. You call that working things out?" She opened her mouth to respond, but Karen called her away. Tom walked over to me looking satisfied. "That went well," he said. "Think we'll win?" "I know we'll win. But let's get our own surveyor out there anyway, just to be sure. I know a good one who can do it this week." The surveyor, a meticulous man named Robert Chen, spent 6 hours on my property that Saturday. He used GPS equipment, consulted old property maps, and walked every inch of the boundary lines. When he finished, he showed me the results on his tablet. "Not even close," Robert said. "Your property line is here." He pointed to a spot about 30 feet past where the equipment had been parked. "The easement the HOA filed describes a parcel that's half a mile northwest of here. Someone really screwed up. Can you have a report ready by next week?" "I'll have it ready by Monday." True to his word, Robert delivered a comprehensive survey report to both Tom and the court by Monday afternoon. The HOA's surveyor didn't even begin work until Wednesday, and when their report came in on Friday, it matched Robert's findings almost exactly. Judge Pritchard called another hearing for Monday, May 21st. This one was even shorter than the first. "Both surveys agree," Judge Pritchard said. "The equipment was placed on Mr. Calloway's property, not on easement land." The HOA's easement describes a completely different parcel, and notification was sent to the wrong address. The easement, as filed, does not apply to Mr. Calloway's property. Furthermore, the notification process was fatally flawed. I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Calloway. The HOA is ordered to pay storage fees in the amount of $3,000, plus damages to be assessed, plus Mr. Calloway's legal fees. "Do you want to handle damages today, or do you need time to get estimates?" "I have estimates, Your Honor," Tom said. He'd had me get 3 different quotes for removing the tire tracks, reseeding the field, and replacing the destroyed native plants. The lowest estimate was $8,000. The highest was $14,000. Judge Pritchard looked at the estimates. "I'm awarding $10,000 for property damage, plus $3,000 in storage fees, plus $15,000 in legal fees, for a total of $28,000. The HOA has 30 days to pay. If they fail to pay, Mr. Calloway can place a lien on HOA properties." Case closed. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Patricia avoided eye contact as she left with Karen. Dave Hartwell actually came up to me on the courthouse steps. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm sorry about the mess. They told me it was the right property. I should have verified it myself. Appreciate that. And between you and me, I'm glad you pushed back. That HOA has been a nightmare to work with. Everything's a power trip with them." He shook my hand and left. Tom took me to lunch to celebrate. "So what are you going to do when you get the money?" he asked. "Fix the field, obviously, and maybe upgrade my security system. After that, I'll probably donate some to native plant conservation groups. They'd appreciate it. You could also move somewhere without an HOA." I thought about that. But here's the thing, they backed down. Judge made it clear their easement doesn't apply to my property. I'm betting Patricia's going to be a lot less aggressive from now on. I was wrong about that. The HOA paid the judgment on June 15th, 3 days before the deadline. $28,000 deposited directly into my account. I hired a landscaping company that specialized in native plant restoration, and by mid-July, my field was on its way to recovery. Young wildflowers were sprouting through the repaired soil, and butterflies were already finding their way back. But in early August, I received a violation notice in the mail. The HOA claimed my property was not in compliance with community standards. Specifically, they cited the following violations: grass exceeding 3 inches in height, unapproved plants in the front yard, mailbox requiring repainting, and failure to maintain aesthetic harmony with neighboring properties. Each violation carried a fine of $100 per day until corrected. I called Tom. They're going after me again. Harassment violations. Forward me the notice. This might actually be good for us. Good how? Because it demonstrates a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. After we just won a lawsuit against them. Grant, I think it's time we challenge whether the HOA has any legitimate authority over your property at all. Tom filed a motion arguing that the entire process by which my property was brought under HOA control was flawed. The notification process that had gone wrong with the easement had also been wrong with the initial HOA incorporation. They'd sent that letter to 1247 Hillside Road 2. The hearing was set for September 10th. In the meantime, I ignored the violation notices. They kept coming every week with the fines adding up. According to their math, I now owed them over $8,000. Patricia started showing up at my house personally. The first time was on a Saturday morning in late August. She had a clipboard and a camera. "I'm here to document violations," she announced when I opened the door. "Get off my property. I have a right as HOA president to inspect properties for compliance. You have no such right. This is private property and you're trespassing. The HOA bylaws clearly state that. I don't care what they state. Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff." She left but came back 2 days later. Then again the following week. Each time I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and filed a report. Rodriguez had gotten to know me pretty well by this point. "Mr. Calloway, I'll be honest with you," he said during one of Patricia's visits. "This is still a civil matter. Unless she threatens you or damages property, there's not much we can do. She's harassing me. Coming to my home repeatedly after being told to leave. Document every visit. Dates, times, what was said. It'll help in court." I started keeping a log. Patricia visited 12 times in 3 weeks. She took photos of my property from the road. She left notices on my door. She even contacted some of my neighbors, asking them to report on my activities. One of those neighbors, a retired school teacher named Margaret, called to warn me. "That HOA woman came by asking questions about you," Margaret said. "Wanted to know if you had loud parties, if your dog barked, if you had people coming and going at odd hours. I told her you were the quietest neighbor I'd ever had." "Thanks, Margaret. She seems obsessed. Be careful." The September 10th hearing was in a larger courtroom this time. Judge Pritchard had recused herself because of the previous case, and the new judge was a younger man named Robert Klein. Tom had briefed me that Judge Klein was known for being impatient with bureaucratic overreach. Karen Ashford presented the HOA's case. They claimed my property had been properly incorporated into the HOA boundaries through the zoning reconfiguration, that I'd been properly notified, and that I was subject to all HOA rules and regulations. My violation of those rules justified the fines they'd levied. Tom countered with evidence that every piece of mail the HOA had sent to me had been addressed to 1247 Hillside Road, not 1274. He presented records showing that someone else lived at 1247, a woman named Dorothy Kim, who'd moved in 2 years ago and had been very confused by all the HOA letters she'd received about property she didn't own. Tom had even gotten a statement from Dorothy. The HOA's entire case rests on proper notification, Tom argued, but they've consistently sent everything to the wrong address. My client never received notification that his property was being incorporated into the HOA. He never received a chance to object. The incorporation is therefore invalid as it applies to his property. Your Honor, Karen said, the property boundaries were established by County Zoning Commission. The notification requirement was satisfied by sending letters to addresses on the tax roll. The wrong addresses, Judge Klein pointed out. Counsel, do you have any evidence that Mr. Calloway actually received notification? The HOA fulfilled its legal obligation to attempt notification. That's not what I asked. Did Mr. Calloway receive the notices? Yes or no? No, Your Honor. But then how can he be bound by rules he never agreed to follow and violations he was never properly informed about? Judge Klein flipped through the papers. It says here the HOA has fined him over $8,000 for violations including, and I'm reading this correctly, grass exceeding 3 inches in height and unapproved plants. Counsel, what makes a plant unapproved? The HOA maintains a list of acceptable plants for landscaping. Native wildflowers are not on that list. So Mr. Calloway is being fined for growing native Texas plants on his own property. He's being fined for violating HOA standards that all residents agreed to follow. Except he never agreed to anything because he never received proper notification. Judge Klein looked at me. Mr. Calloway, do you want to be part of this HOA? No, Your Honor. There's your answer. I'm ruling that due to inadequate notification, Mr. Calloway's property is not subject to HOA authority. All fines are vacated. The HOA is ordered to update its records to reflect that Mr. Calloway's property is not within their jurisdiction. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Calloway's legal fees for this action. Case closed. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, you can't just remove a property from HOA jurisdiction. I'm not removing it. I'm ruling it was never properly added in the first place. Sit down, madam. Outside the courthouse, Tom was grinning. That's it. You're free. They can't touch you anymore. She's not going to let this go. Doesn't matter. She has no authority over you. If she keeps harassing you, we can get a restraining order. I drove home feeling vindicated but not quite relieved. Tom was right that Patricia had no legal authority over me anymore, but I knew her type. This wasn't over. I was proven right 2 weeks later when someone cut down 3 of my young oak trees. The trees were close to the road, visible from the street, and they'd been severed clean through with a chainsaw. I called the sheriff immediately. This time it wasn't Rodriguez who came out. It was a detective named Sarah Wu. Mr. Calloway, I understand you've had an ongoing dispute with your HOA, she said as we stood looking at the destroyed trees. Former HOA. Court ruled they have no authority over my property. Right. And you suspect someone from the HOA did this. Who else would have a motive? Anyone have access to your property? No, that's the thing. Someone had to trespass to reach these trees. Detective Wu took photos and measurements. I'll be honest, without witnesses or video footage, it's going to be hard to prove who did this. Do you have security cameras? Not ones that cover this part of the property. I'm installing more next week. Good idea. In the meantime, I'll talk to some people, see if anyone saw anything. She left, and I was standing there staring at the ruined trees when Margaret walked over from her house next door. I saw something, she said quietly. Last night around midnight, a white SUV parked on the road. Someone got out, did something by your trees, and drove away. Took maybe 10 minutes. Can you describe the SUV? Looked like a Lexus. One of those medium-sized ones. Didn't get the license plate, sorry. Did you see who got out? Too dark. But I know Patricia Anders drives a white Lexus. I called Detective Wu back immediately and told her what Margaret had seen. She returned that afternoon with another officer and took a formal statement from Margaret. It's circumstantial, Detective Wu said, but combined with the harassment pattern and the motive, It's enough for me to have a conversation with Miss Anders. We'll see what she says. I installed 8 new security cameras the next day, covering every angle of my property. 2 days after that, Detective Wu called me. "Can you come down to the station? There's something you need to see." At the police station, Detective Wu led me to a small room with a computer monitor. Patricia Anders agreed to talk to us. Well, she actually couldn't stop talking. "We have her on video and I want to show you something." She played a recording of the interview. Patricia sat across from the detective, looking defensive. "I didn't cut down any trees," Patricia said in the recording, "but you were on Mr. Calloway's property that night." "I was in the neighborhood. That's not illegal. At midnight, I couldn't sleep. I went for a drive and just happened to stop at Mr. Calloway's property. I might have driven by. He's been a problem for the community. I wanted to see what he was doing." What he was doing at midnight, Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "Look, maybe I stopped to look at his property. He's violated so many standards, someone needs to keep an eye on him." Someone cut down 3 trees on his property that night, trees that would have violated HOA height restrictions if he was still subject to those rules. "I didn't cut anything down." "Do you know who did?" "No." But her eyes shifted when she said it. Detective Wu paused the video. "She's lying," Wu said. "But we don't have direct evidence she cut the trees. We kept talking to people, though, and then we got lucky." She played another video. This one showed a different woman, middle-aged with dyed blonde hair. "My name is Susan Harper. I'm on the HOA board." Patricia called me around 11:30 that night and asked if I wanted to help take care of a problem. I said no. She said she was going to handle it herself. "Did she say what problem?" the detective asked. "She said Grant Calloway's trees were an eyesore and someone needed to do something about it. I told her to let it go, but she was really worked up. She'd been angry ever since the court ruled his property wasn't under our jurisdiction." Detective Wu stopped the video and looked at me. "We have enough for criminal mischief charges. The trees were worth about $1,500 according to an arborist I consulted. That makes it a misdemeanor. We're going to arrest her." "When?" "Already did. She's in custody now. Her bail hearing is tomorrow." I sat back in the chair, processing this. She really cut down my trees. Appears so. We also got a warrant for her phone records. If she coordinated with anyone else, we'll find out. Patricia made bail the next day, but her legal troubles were just beginning. The criminal mischief charge was straightforward, but Tom convinced me to file a civil lawsuit as well, seeking damages for the trees, emotional distress, and ongoing harassment. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Patricia as president. Karen Ashford resigned as legal counsel. The new board president was a reasonable man named Frank who called me to apologize. "What Patricia did doesn't represent the values of this community," Frank said. "We're deeply sorry for everything you've been through. Appreciate that. And for what it's worth, we've updated all our records. Your property is clearly marked as non-HOA in our system. Nobody will bother you again. Thank you." Patricia's trial was set for December. In the meantime, she wasn't allowed to contact me directly due to a protective order, but that didn't stop her from talking to reporters. A local news station ran a story about the dispute, painting me as a troublemaker who divided the community. The story backfired on her. Comments on the news station's Facebook post overwhelmingly supported me. People shared their own HOA horror stories. A few of my neighbors wrote letters to the editor praising me for standing up to HOA overreach. In November, Tom called with news. Patricia's lawyer wants to discuss a plea deal. She's willing to plead guilty to criminal mischief in exchange for probation and restitution. How much restitution? $25,000. That covers the trees, your legal fees, and damages for harassment. And she admits what she did. As part of the plea, yes. It'll be on the record. Then I'll accept it. The plea hearing was quick. Patricia stood before the judge looking diminished in a way I'd never seen before. Her distinctive haircut was different now, softer, less aggressive. She wore a subdued gray suit. "Miss Anders," the judge said, "you're pleading guilty to criminal mischief. Do you understand that this conviction will be part of your permanent record?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you agree to pay $25,000 in restitution to Mr. Calloway?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You're also being sentenced to 2 years probation. During that time, you are prohibited from serving on any HOA board and from contacting Mr. Calloway or his property in any way. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." It was over. Patricia was led away by her lawyer, and I walked out of the courthouse with Tom beside me. "How do you feel?" Tom asked. "Tired, relieved, maybe a little sad." "Sad." She destroyed herself over this. All because she couldn't let go of control over property that wasn't even hers to control. "That's on her, not you, I know. But still." The restitution check arrived 2 weeks before Christmas. $25,000. I used $10,000 to replace the trees and make additional improvements to my property. Another $5,000 went to Tom to cover his fees beyond what the court had awarded. The remaining $10,000 I donated to the Meadowbrook Parks Foundation, which maintained trails and natural areas throughout the county. My field recovered beautifully. By the following spring, you couldn't tell anything had ever been wrong with it. The wildflowers bloomed in waves of purple, yellow, and orange. Butterflies returned in droves. I set up a small bench near the center of the field where I could sit and watch the sunset. One evening in late April, I was sitting on that bench when a car pulled up to my house. I tensed for a moment, old reflexes kicking in, but it was Frank from the HOA board, and he had a basket of something. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said as he walked over. "My wife made cookies. Wanted me to bring them by as a peace offering. That's kind of her. Look, I know things got ugly with Patricia. The board wanted you to know that's not who we are. We're just trying to maintain a nice neighborhood for everyone. I get that. I just wanted to live on my own land without someone dictating what plants I could grow. And you should be able to. Your property, your rules." He looked around at the field. "This is beautiful, by the way. My kids love seeing the butterflies when we drive by. Bring them over sometime. There are benches and a little trail. Anyone's welcome to walk through. Really, sure, it's meant to be enjoyed." Frank left, and I sat watching the sun sink lower. The sky turned orange and pink, and the wildflowers seemed to glow in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear kids playing in the neighborhood. A dog barked. Life moved on. The legal battle had cost me time, money, and stress, but it had been worth it. I'd stood up for my property rights and won. More importantly, I'd established a precedent. The HOA couldn't just claim authority over properties through sloppy paperwork and wrong addresses. They had to follow proper procedures, respect property rights, and treat homeowners with basic dignity. A few months later, I heard that Patricia had moved away. Someone said she'd relocated to Arizona to live with her sister. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sympathy. She'd built her identity around controlling her little corner of the world, and when someone challenged that control, she'd lost everything. But that was her choice, her actions, her consequences. I'd simply defended what was mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "See you at the neighborhood BBQ on Saturday. Frank's hosting. Says you're invited." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to stay isolated, protected behind my property lines. But that wasn't really living. Frank and the new board seemed reasonable. My neighbors had supported me through the dispute. Maybe it was time to be part of a community again, just on my own terms. "I'll be there," I texted back. Saturday came with perfect weather. I brought a case of beer to the BBQ and found myself actually enjoying conversations with people from the development. They asked about my field, about the native plants, about whether I really grew all those wildflowers myself. "Takes patience," I told a young couple who just moved in. "Native plants are slow to establish, but once they're rooted, they're tough. They belong here. They work with the land instead of against it. We'd love to try something like that in our yard," the woman said. Happy to share some seeds in the fall. As the evening wore on and the light faded, I found myself standing with Frank, watching kids run around with sparklers. "Thanks for coming," Frank said. "Means a lot to the neighborhood. Thanks for the invitation. You know, there's a board position opening up in the fall. We could use someone who actually cares about property rights and community building instead of just rules enforcement." I laughed. "After everything with Patricia, you want me on the HOA board, not our board. Your property's not under our jurisdiction, remember. But we're starting a community association that's separate from the HOA. No binding rules, no fines, just neighbors working together on shared projects. Improving the playground, organizing events, that kind of thing. Completely voluntary. That I might be interested in. Think about it." I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just for my property, but for the idea that people could live near each other without control battles and power trips. We could be neighbors instead of just adjacent property owners. My security cameras, still diligently recording, captured me walking through my field that night, just wandering among the wildflowers under a full moon. I looked peaceful in the footage. Content. The next morning, I woke to find deer grazing in my field. 3 of them, a doe and 2 fawns, moving carefully through the flowers. I watched them from my window, coffee in hand, and thought about how this was exactly what I'd wanted when I bought this property. Peace. Beauty. Connection to the land. I'd fought for it and won. Not just in court, but in the deeper sense of defending a way of life that mattered to me. The storage fees I'd charged had been a small part of the fight, just a tactic to establish leverage and get the HOA's attention. The real battle had been about respect, boundaries, and the right to live on my own land according to my own values. Later that day, I printed out the final property survey, the one that clearly showed my boundaries and confirmed the land was mine, outside any HOA jurisdiction. I framed it and hung it in my office, next to the window overlooking the field. Tom called that afternoon. Got the final settlement check from Patricia's insurance company, an additional $5,000 for your pain and suffering. Deposit it or frame it, deposit it. That money can do some good. What are you going to do with it? There's a kid in Meadowbrook who wants to study environmental science but can't afford college. Margaret told me about him. I think I'll set up a small scholarship. You're a better person than I am. I'm just someone who got lucky enough to win. Might as well spread it around. I donated the money anonymously through the local high school scholarship fund, with the stipulation that it go to a student interested in native plant conservation or environmental protection. The school counselor called to thank whoever had donated, not knowing it was me. That felt right. Summer passed into fall. My field went dormant, the wildflowers dropping seeds for next spring's growth. I spent October expanding the trail system and adding bird feeders. Margaret came over most mornings for coffee and we'd sit watching the birds together. "You know," she said one morning, "when you first moved here, I thought you were antisocial, just wanted to be left alone." I did want to be left alone, but now look at you. Kids from the neighborhood coming to learn about butterflies, leading nature walks, serving on the community association board. Wanting to be left alone doesn't mean wanting to be lonely. There's a difference. Patricia never understood that difference. No, she didn't. In November, I got a letter in the mail. Real mail, properly addressed to 1274 Hillside Road. It was from Patricia. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Grant, the letter read, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, and I'm hoping this doesn't violate the court order since it's just a letter. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the lawyer-approved version I had to give in court. I was wrong. About everything. I let being HOA president become my whole identity, and when you challenged that, I couldn't handle it. I did things I'm ashamed of. Cut down your trees. Harassed you. Made your life miserable. You were right to fight back, and I'm glad you won. The world needs fewer people like I was and more people like you. I'm in therapy now, working on the control issues. Arizona is good for me. I'm nobody special here, just another retiree, and that's what I needed. I hope your field is beautiful. I hope you find peace there. I'm sorry I tried to take that from you, Patricia. I read the letter twice, then called Tom. She sent me a letter. Is that a violation of the protective order? What does it say? I read it to him. That's actually a genuine apology, Tom said. Technically, it might violate the order, but I wouldn't pursue it unless she keeps contacting you. Sometimes people need to take accountability. Sounds like she's trying to do that. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe not. The apology was appreciated, but it didn't change anything that had happened. Patricia had made her choices. She had to live with the consequences, just like I had to live with mine. December brought the first frost. My field looked beautiful, covered in morning ice, each dead flower stalk outlined in white crystals. I took photos and posted them on the Community Association's Facebook page. People commented about how lovely they were, how they'd never noticed how beautiful winter could be. On Christmas Eve, Margaret invited me over for dinner with her family. Her kids and grandkids were visiting, and the house was warm with cooking smells and laughter. We ate too much, played board games, and I felt something I hadn't felt since moving to Texas, like I belonged somewhere. Thank you for this, I told Margaret as I was leaving. You stood up for yourself, she said. You showed all of us that we don't have to accept being pushed around. That matters. Driving home, I thought about the past year, the bulldozer in my field, the court battles, Patricia's harassment and eventual breakdown, the victory that hadn't felt quite like victory until months later, the slow rebuilding of community on better terms. It had been worth it. All of it. My property was mine, clearly and legally established. No HOA could claim authority over it. I could grow whatever plants I wanted, let my grass reach whatever height suited me, paint my mailbox any color I chose. More importantly, I'd proven a principle, that property rights meant something, that proper procedures mattered, and that people couldn't just bulldoze their way onto your land, literally or figuratively. The storage fees I'd charged had seemed petty to some people, but they'd served their purpose. They'd established that I was serious, that I wouldn't be steamrolled, and that there were financial consequences for treating me poorly. Combined with the legal strategy Tom had crafted, those fees had been the leverage that forced the HOA to pay attention. New Year's Eve came with unseasonably warm weather. I sat on my bench in the field as midnight approached, watching fireworks from nearby neighborhoods light up the sky. In the flashing colors, I could see the outline of my property, the new trees growing where Patricia had cut down the old ones, the path winding through what would be wildflowers again in spring. My phone buzzed with messages. Tom wishing me Happy New Year. Frank inviting me to a community association meeting in January. Margaret asking if I wanted to join her family for New Year's Day brunch. I responded to all of them, then put my phone away and just sat in the quiet. Somewhere in the field, an owl hooted. The last fireworks faded, and the neighborhood settled into peaceful darkness. This was what I'd fought for. Not just the legal right to my property, but the peace of sitting on my own land, unbothered, free to live according to my own values. It had cost me tens of thousands in legal fees before the judgments had been paid. It had cost me sleep and stress and months of constant conflict. But sitting there in the dark, listening to the owl and feeling the winter wind on my face, I knew I'd do it all again. Because some things are worth fighting for. Your land, your peace, your right to live without someone else's arbitrary rules crushing your freedom. The storage fees had been just the beginning. But they'd sent a message. This is my property, and if you're going to use it, you're going to pay for the privilege. That message had resonated through every court filing, every hearing, every judgment. I'd won not by being aggressive or petty, but by standing firm on a simple principle. This land is mine, and you don't get to take it just because you think you have authority. In the end, that's what had made the difference. Not the money, not the legal tactics. Just the unwillingness to back down when I was right. I stood up from the bench and walked back to my house, ready for whatever the new year might bring. My field would bloom again in spring. The butterflies would return. Life would go on, peaceful and free, exactly as I'd always wanted it to be. And somewhere in Arizona, Patricia was learning the same lesson I'd learned years ago. That control is an illusion, that power over others is empty, and that real peace comes from living your own life without trying to dominate someone else's. The lights in my house glowed warm against the dark. I went inside, locked the door, and looked out at my property one last time before bed. Mine. Free. Protected. It had been quite a year.